The Obsidian Club was so loud on a Tuesday night that the bass made my ribs shake. I was there for one reason, to find my little brother Leo before he found trouble, and when I finally spotted him across the room, he wasn't dancing. He had his camera pointed at two men talking in a booth. One of them was a city official. The other was Matteo Rossi, a man you're supposed to be afraid of. Leo's camera clicked. It was a soft sound, but I heard it. My feet stuck to the spilled drink on the floor as I pushed toward him. I had to get him out before anyone noticed. I was almost there when a large hand clamped down on my shoulder. I turned, and Silas Crow was right behind me. He was a rival boss. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You see something interesting, little bird?" he asked. His grip was too tight. I tried to pull away, but he held me firm. I looked past him toward Leo, who was staring at us with wide eyes. Silas leaned in close. His breath smelled like mint and something bitter. "Photographs can be such dangerous things," he said, his voice low and calm. That's when I felt a real fear, a cold feeling that started in my stomach. My hands started to shake at my sides. I forced them to be still. I had to say something, anything, to get us out. Before I could speak, another voice cut through the noise. "She's with me." Matteo Rossi was suddenly there. He placed his own hand over Crow's on my shoulder. His touch wasn't gentle, but it was deliberate. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on Sila's. I saw the muscle in his jaw work. He applied a quiet pressure until Crow's hand dropped from my shoulder. "She's a witness," Matteo said. His voice left no room for argument. He didn't move his hand from where it now rested on my back. The weight of it felt heavy. Final. It was a message to everyone watching. Silas Crow took a slow step back, his cold smile still fixed in place. He gave a small, unfriendly nod. Then he turned and walked away into the crowd. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I looked up at Matteo Rossi. His expression was hard, but his eyes held a question. I hadn't figured out yet what he meant by calling me a witness, or what that would cost me. The cold, sharp pressure of Silas's signet ring against my collarbone still felt like a fresh bruise. I stumbled out into a rainy alley. The smell of overturned dumpsters cut through the club's perfume. I pressed my back against the wet brick wall. My brother Leo was somewhere in the city with a target on his back because of me. A man in a dark suit, one of Matteo's, took my arm to guide me toward a black car. I pulled away. I needed to run to find Leo myself. Matteo Rossi appeared beside me. His suit was perfect, but his face was tight. He looked right at me. "Clara, get in the car." I shook my head. My whole body was shaking. "I'm not going with you. I have to get to my brother." That's when Silas Crow's smooth voice cut through the alley's noise. He stood framed in the club's service door, his silver hair neat under the light. "She has a point, Matteo." He smiled his politician's smile. "Her brother is at the Neon Net Cafe on 5th. My men are already on their way to clean up his mess." My breath stopped. The encrypted file, the hard drive. Leo was there. Matteo turned to Silas. I saw the scar along his jaw stand out white against his skin. He didn't yell, he just lifted his hand. A shot cracked out from a rooftop across the alley. It hit the wall an inch from Silas's head. His smile vanished. Then all hell broke loose. More gunfire erupted from both ends of the alley. Matteo's men shoved Silas back inside and returned fire. Matteo grabbed me. He wrapped one arm around my waist and hauled me off my feet. I fought him. I kicked and screamed for him to let me go. He was impossibly strong. He didn't even grunt. He was just a wall of controlled force, carrying me through the chaos. He threw open the door of an armored car and pushed me inside onto the cool leather seat. And here's the part I still don't understand. My hands had stopped shaking the moment he touched me. The violent grip of his hand still burned against my arm. I was pressed into the cold leather of a moving car's backseat. The partition between us and the driver was up, sealing us in a quiet, moving box. Matteo Rossi sat a careful foot away from me. He was checking his phone, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. I could hear my own breathing, too loud in the silence. "Where is my brother?" I asked. My voice was flat. He put his phone away slowly. Then he looked at me, really looked. "Safe, for now." He didn't offer more. Instead, he reached into his suit jacket. I flinched back into the leather. He paused, his hand inside his jacket. He saw my reaction. Something in his face changed, a small tightening around his eyes. He pulled his hand out, empty. It was a strange, deliberate motion. He placed both hands on his knees. "You called me a witness," I said. "I didn't see anything." You saw Sela's crow speak to you. You saw me claim you. In my world, that's enough. His voice was low, almost tired. He'll assume you saw more. He'll assume you're my weakness. So now you are. I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. But a cold understanding settled in my stomach. My hands, usually marked with charcoal, were clean and clenched in my lap. You're using me as a shield, I whispered. No. He turned fully toward me. The space between us felt charged, but neither of us moved. I am the shield. You're the thing being shielded. There's a difference. He said it like a simple fact. His control was a wall around us both. I felt the heat of his arm near mine on the seat. And if I don't want your protection? He didn't answer right away. He looked out his window at the dark city. When he spoke, his voice was softer. Then your brother dies. And you'll follow. He finally looked back at me. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers flexed once on his knee. It was the only crack. He just told me a terrible truth, and he showed no pleasure in it. The car slowed, turning. We were close now. He didn't look away from me. I didn't look away from him. Real quick, if you're here for the dangerous man who's equal parts terrifying and fascinating, hit subscribe. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this ends. The air was heavy with everything he hadn't said and everything I couldn't say back. The sharp ache in my knuckles pulsed with every heartbeat. Inside the car's armored shell, the sterile chill of the air raised goosebumps on my arms. I turned my head toward him. "Where is my brother?" I asked. My voice was flat. He did not look at me. "Alive, in a safe place." That isn't an answer. It's the only one you get. He finally turned. The passing streetlights caught the faint, pale line of an old scar near his temple. I'd missed that before. "Your old life is over, Clara. You saw the photo." I saw a picture. I don't know what it means. Means men like Sela's crow own judges and councilmen. His voice was quiet, but it filled the space. "It means you're a loose end. The only reason you're breathing is because you're with me." He said it like a simple fact. The cash, the gun, the scars, none of it was normal. But that fact sat between us now, cold and solid as the car door. I wanted to scream. Instead, I made my hands relax in my lap. "Then use me. Tell me what to do. But I need to hear Leo's voice. I need to know he's safe." Mateo studied me for a long moment. His eyes were dark. Then he gave a single, slow nod. It wasn't kindness. It was a transaction. He reached inside his suit jacket. He pulled out a plain black phone. He pressed a single button and handed it to me. The line rang twice. "Leo," I said when he answered. "Clara, thank God." His voice was tinny but clear. Relief washed through me so fast it made my chest hurt. "Are you okay? They just gave me a bag and a key and told me to run." "I'm okay. Listen to them. Do exactly what they say." I looked straight at Mateo as I said it. He held my look, his expression unchanged. "I'll find you when I can." We said quick goodbyes. The call ended. I handed the phone back. My hands were steady, but they began to tremble. I understood then why my hands had stopped shaking the moment he touched me. It wasn't trust. It was the pure, clear certainty of having no choice left. "Good," Mateo said. He took the phone. His fingers brushed mine. The contact was brief and deliberate. "Now we work." The vice grip of panic still clenched my ribs. I braced my hands against the cool, perfect marble of the safe house bathroom sink. Its flawless surface mocked my turmoil. Mateo stood beside me. He was opening a small metal first aid kit. The light above the mirror was very bright. He took out an antiseptic wipe. His movements were precise. He did not look at my face. "Your wrist," he said. His voice was flat. I looked down. A thin red line marked my skin. I hadn't felt the cut happen at the club. He took my hand without asking. His fingers were warm and dry. He held me firmly but not roughly. He cleaned the cut. His focus was absolute. I watched the top of his bowed head. He had a single white hair at his temple. This clinical care felt more intimate than any threat. I made myself look away from his hands. I saw a faded mark on the back of his own hand. It was a small, pale crescent. It looked very old. "What's that from?" I asked. My voice sounded too loud. He paused for a second. He kept cleaning my wrist. "A dog," he said finally. "Did it bite you?" "No." He tossed the used wipe into a small bin. He still held my hand. "I was 9. A stray pup followed me home. My father said we couldn't keep it. He made me take it to the river." Mateo's thumb pressed once against my palm. It wasn't a gentle touch, it was a point of pressure. The concrete was slick. I fell, scraped my hand open on the edge. He let go of my hand. He turned to close the kit. The story was over. We were close in the small room. I could smell the clean scent of his soap. I could see the tight line of his shoulders under his suit jacket. He'd shown me a piece of his childhood. It was a story of a lost dog and a father's harsh lesson. I understood it perfectly. He had never been allowed to be soft. The silence between us now was thick. It was full of the things we could not say. I wanted to ask more. I wanted to know if the boy who fell was still in there. But I did not speak. He did not turn around. I stared at my own reflection in the cold window, the ghost of his scar still a memory on my fingertips. The city lights were a blur of smeared color below. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn. Mateo walked in. He placed a small paper bag on the steel counter with a quiet thud. "Your brother is cooperating," he said. His voice was flat. "He's safe. He has what he needs. You won't call him." I watched his reflection in the dark glass. He had a gun on his hip. I knew he had blood on his hands. "What's in the bag?" He was quiet for a beat. Then he moved to the counter and pulled out a small box, a cheap burner phone. He set it down. "A way for him to reach me, only me, not you." His thumb rubbed slowly over the edge of the box. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the phone like it was a sentence. I didn't know what to say to that. "Sila's Crow has men watching your old place," he said. His tone changed, all business again. "He knows you took something from the club. He'll peel this city apart to find you." He came to stand beside me at the window, not too close. The city lights made hard lines on his face. I could see a muscle working in his jaw. He was tense, not for himself, for the mess I was in. I turned from the window to face him. My side ached. "So I stay here, I hide, and you use what I took to break him." I kept my voice level. "What happens to me after?" Mateo looked down at me. His dark eyes weren't cold. They were full of a terrible focus. "You stay alive. That's the only thing that happens next." He reached out. His hand almost touched my arm. He stopped himself. His fingers curled into a fist. He let it drop to his side. That small crack that halted motion scared me more than any threat. I stayed because my brother was alive in this man's world. I stayed because leaving now meant a bullet. I gave a single, sharp nod. I didn't agree. I accepted the terms of the war. The phantom pressure of his hand on my shoulder was still there, a cold spot through my shirt. Sunlight streamed through the dusty living room window, catching the frantic swirl of motes in the air. I laid out the things from my bag on the worn coffee table. The photo, the plans, the hard drive, pieces of a puzzle I didn't understand. Mateo stood by the empty fireplace. He watched me sort through the evidence of my own ruin. I picked up the city map I'd taken from the trailer. I pointed to the grid of streets. "Show me," I said. I leaned over the table. My knuckles were white from pressing down on the wood. Mateo came over. He took a red pen from his jacket. He didn't sit. He drew a thick line along the river. "Rossi trucks here." His voice was flat. He moved the pen north. He made a harsh circle around a cluster of blocks. "Crow casinos here. The docks between are contested." He tapped the pen hard on the circled area. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. "Trespass, you bleed. That's the only rule." He drew a small, precise X over my apartment building. The red ink bled through the paper. I saw his hand then, the one that had held mine in the car. His fingers were long. A small, old burn marked the skin between his thumb and forefinger. It was a worker's mark, not a fighter's. "And my brother?" I asked. My voice was small. "Where does he fit on this map of blood?" Mateo looked away. He stared at the map like it held a verdict. "Leo's a liability now. He knows names. He saw faces at the club." He said it as a simple fact. He crumpled the corner of the map near my old neighborhood with his free hand. The paper made a dry, tearing sound. I heard the finality. My cooperation wasn't a choice. It was the price of my brother's life. I sat down hard on the edge of the sofa. The old springs groaned under me. My old life was paper, and it was burning. I reached out and smoothed the crumpled corner of the map flat with both hands. I pressed until my palms ached. It was useless, but I did it anyway. "So I learn," I said. My throat was tight. "I learn your rules. I learn his moves. And then what?" I looked up at Mateo. His dark eyes were on my hands, still pressing the paper flat. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was the answer. The map was his. The city was his. I was sitting in his safe house, breathing his air. The control was absolute, and it was the only thing keeping me alive. The raw ache in my throat from my screaming confession was the only thing I could feel. The silence in the safe house was so thick I could taste the dust in the air. I was slumped on the worn couch. Mateo stood across the room, a statue framed by the dusty window. He didn't move, he didn't speak. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. I finally looked up at him. I expected anger or cold dismissal. His face showed neither. He just watched me, and his dark eyes held an expression I couldn't name. The silence after he left was a living thing. It pressed against my ears. I sat there on that couch, my throat raw from screaming, and I finally understood something. That lock clicking shut when he walked out, it wasn't about keeping danger away from me. It was about keeping me in. My hands were still damp with a cold sweat I couldn't get rid of. I was in his study now, surrounded by the smell of old books and a single candle burning low. The air felt heavy. He was heading for the door again, and I just moved. I stepped right into his path. The floor was cold under my feet. I didn't look away from his face. "Show me the photo," I said. My voice was steady. "Partner." He stopped. He was close enough that I could see the tired lines around his eyes, deeper in the dim light. His hand went to the inside pocket of his jacket. His fingers touched something, but he didn't pull it out. He just froze. For a second, I saw something flash in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It looked like pain. I didn't know what to do with that. I just stood my ground. Finally, he took out a small photograph. He placed it face down on the desk between us. His knuckles were white where he pressed them against the wood. "Sila's with a federal agent," he said, his voice so low I had to lean in. "His oath is broken. This is what my brother's breath cost him." He didn't look at the picture. He watched my face, and I got it. The price for my brother's life wasn't just my cooperation. It was this, dragging this ugly truth out into the open. We were standing so close our shoulders almost touched. The candlelight made the edges of the photo glow. I reached for it. His hand was still there. The back of my fingers brushed against his skin. It was warm. We both pulled our hands back at the same time, like we'd been burned. He left the photo on the desk and took a step back, giving me space. That silent moment, that transfer, it felt heavier than any threat he'd ever made. I looked from the photo to him. His face was a mask again, but his hand, the one that had held the secret, just hung at his side. It looked empty. Later, back in my own apartment, the only smell was burnt coffee from yesterday. His scent, that cedar and bergamot, was still on my coat collar. I waited by the window. The printed dossier was on the table. A digital file is one thing, but paper feels real. It feels like proof. The key turned in the lock. My stomach tightened. Mateo walked in. His suit was a dark gray. His eyes found me immediately. I didn't let him speak. I picked up the dossier and crossed the room. I shoved the top page at him. It was a financial record. It linked him to a Rossi construction firm. My hand shook a little, but I kept my eyes locked on his. "Explain this." He looked at the paper. His whole body went still. He didn't reach for it. He just stared. After what felt like forever, he lifted his hand. But he didn't take the paper. His fingers closed around my wrist, gentle but firm, and he pushed my hand down toward the table. "It doesn't mean what you think it does," he said. His voice was rough. He leaned in a little. I saw the fatigue under his eyes then, a deep tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep. I didn't back down. I let the paper fall, but I didn't pull my wrist away. "Then tell me what it does mean." He looked from the papers to my face. His thumb pressed once, briefly, against the inside of my wrist. A possessive point of contact. Then he let go. He walked past me to the window. He looked out at his city, and he didn't say another word. His silence was the only answer I needed. It confirmed everything. Whatever trust we'd built yesterday shattered right then. I wasn't a partner. I was just an asset on his ledger, and the door was still locked. The dossier's edge had felt sharp in my hand. Now my fingers just hovered over a greasy keyboard in the public library. The screen glowed back at me. I typed in the company name from the photo. Nothing. I tried another variation. My stomach was a knot. Another dead end. Then, a result blinked onto the screen. A shell corporation, a post office box for an address, and the permit for the waterfront site? Approved. The signature was a messy scrawl, one I'd seen before in Mateo's own files. Sila's Crow. A sudden white light swept over my shoulder, lighting up every dust mote in the air. I froze. It pinned the screen and me in its beam. "Hey, you can't be in here after hours." A security guard stood at the records room door. He started walking toward me fast. His boots thudded on the floor. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice sounded thin and high. I stood up too fast. The chair screeched. I turned and shoved the shelf next to me. It tipped with a groan. Files spilled everywhere, a waterfall of paper crashing to the floor. I ran for the emergency exit. The guard yelled again. I hit the bar on the door. and alarms screamed into the night. Cold air hit my face, and I just ran, sprinting across the dark library lawn. I didn't stop until I was across the street. I leaned against a rough concrete wall, trying to catch my breath. I pressed a fist to my sternum. The guard saw my face. He would report it. Sela's own people everywhere. I looked at my empty hand. I'd let the printout fall. But the permit number was seared into my mind. It was real. It was a thread I could pull. The scale of it? Sela's didn't just want a piece of the city. He wanted to own the ground under it. The chain-link fence had left a gritty feeling on my palms. I fumbled with the deadbolt in the dark. Inside my apartment, the only sound was the fridge humming. I didn't turn on the light. I just slid into a chair at the kitchen table. The metal was cold through my jeans. I stared at the dirt under my nails. My whole body felt heavy, like a sack of wet sand. Mateo stood in the doorway. He changed out of his suit into a dark sweater. His shadow stretched long across the floor. I didn't look up. "Why are you still bothering with me?" My voice was flat. It was a real question. I was too tired for games. He was quiet for so long I thought he hadn't heard me. Then I heard the soft shift of his weight. I finally looked up. Mateo was studying his own hands, his head bowed. He ran his thumbs slowly back and forth over his palm. The motion was deliberate. He wasn't deciding what to say. He was deciding whether to say it. "Because you were never supposed to be here." His voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. It wasn't rough or commanding. It was just bare. He meant his world, this war, this apartment, the locked doors and the armed guards. He turned and walked to the kitchen door. He stopped there, his hand on the frame. He didn't look back, but his shoulders were rigid. "Silas has people everywhere, even people I pay. There's an enforcer named Kreshnik. He works for Crow. If you see a man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, you run, you don't think. You run." Then he was gone. The space where he'd stood felt colder. I sat there listening to the fridge hum. I understood now why he'd locked the door after coming in. It wasn't just to keep me in, it was to keep everything else out. The ache from his words stayed with me. It felt like a stone in my throat. Later, I pressed my forehead against a chain-link fence at the construction site. The metal was cold and wet. A rusted section near the post was already cut. I ducked under it, the jagged ends snagging my jacket. I moved fast, keeping low. My eyes were on a site trailer rattling in the wind. I checked over my shoulder for the guard. The empty lot stayed empty. Then the sky just cracked open. It wasn't a sound, it was a rupture. Rain fell in thick, punishing sheets an instant later. It turned the raw earth to slick mud. My boots slid out from under me. I fell hard, my hands plunging into cold muck. I scrambled on all fours toward the cover of a concrete foundation wall. The rain soaked through my clothes in seconds. I couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. A new sound rose over the drumming rain, a low, gathering roar. From the direction of the main gate, a flash flood of runoff water surged across the access road. It swallowed the path back to the fence. My chest tightened with a sharp, cold fear. I was trapped inside the site. I pressed my back against the rough warehouse wall. My breath came in fast, shallow pants. The water kept rising. Then, a metal door on the warehouse wall swung open. It banged shut in a gust of wind. It wasn't locked. It was an invitation or a trap. I had no other path. I wiped the cold rain from my eyes with a muddy sleeve. My hair was plastered to my skull. I stepped out of the downpour and into the dark, dry mouth of the warehouse. The door swung shut behind me with a final, hollow clang. The sound of the storm became muted, distant. I was in. The jacket was still warm from him, heavy on my shoulders, but the cold was inside me now. It had settled deep. One thing kept pulling at my mind, what I'd seen right before that metal door slammed shut behind me. I was curled on the floor of that trailer, my cheek against the gritty linoleum. The storm was a constant drumming on the metal roof. I was shivering, but it wasn't working. Then a dry weight settled over me. I opened my eyes. Mateo had draped his suit jacket over me. He stood there, his white shirt soaked through and stuck to his chest. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked to the little sink in the corner. I heard the faucet squeak. He came back with a paper towel. It was damp and rough. He knelt down and took my left hand. His own hands were big, marked with old scars. He started wiping the mud from my fingers. He did it slowly, carefully. A kind of gentleness I never thought he had in him. He didn't look at me. He just focused on my hand. "Why you?" I asked. My voice was a scratchy whisper against the rain. He kept cleaning, but his hand slowed. "Silas has other men," I said. "You could have sent anyone." He stopped. He sat back on his heels and his shoulders dropped. That rigid control he always carried just left him. He just looked tired, worn down to the bone. Because I find people, he said. He said it softly, like he was telling himself. I always have since I was a boy. He looked at the dirty paper towel in his hand. There was a kid, Marco, lived 3 doors down. He got caught in the middle of a business dispute, wrong place. They left him in an alley. Mateo's voice was flat, empty, but his throat moved when he swallowed. I was the one who tracked the scent of his new sneakers through the rain. I found him. He paused, not in time. He finally looked at me. I don't send men, I go. If something is mine to find, I find it. His world had almost killed me once. I knew it would try again. The silence after that was thick, heavy. We were close there on that dirty floor. I could see the tiny drops of water along his temple. He didn't move away, but his hand came up, not to touch me, to adjust the collar of his jacket where it bunched at my neck. His fingers brushed my skin, just for a second. A single point of warmth in all that cold. Then he pulled back. Just like that, the distance was back. He stood up and turned toward the trailer's rattling door. He left the thing he had almost said hanging in the damp air between us. The thing he had almost said. I'd been wrong to ignore it, and now in the trailer's main office, the harsh light felt too bright. It bleached everything. Mateo found a dusty tarp in the corner and shook it out with a snap. We go in 5 minutes, he said. His voice was firm again. The man from the alley was gone. He turned his back to check his phone, his shoulders blocking the window. I nodded but didn't move. My eyes scanned the floor, avoiding him, and that's when I saw it. A rectangular panel near the desk. One corner was lifted. The pull was physical, stronger than my fear. I knelt and worked my fingers under the loose laminate. It gave way with a soft crack. Dust swirled in the light. Underneath was a hollow space, and inside that space was a small, gray floor safe. Its dial was speckled with rust. Don't. Mateo's voice cut through the quiet. He was already crossing the room, but my hand was already on the cold metal handle. It wasn't even locked. It turned under my palm. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers tight. I pulled the door open anyway. Inside weren't stacks of cash. It was a thick roll of papers, tied with string. I pulled them out with my free hand. The top sheet was a blueprint. The title block read VANCEDOCKS Sector 7A. My family's docs. I just held them. My breath stuck in my throat. Mateo stared at the papers in my hands. His grip on my wrist loosened, but he didn't let go. He leaned closer, his other hand flattening on the desk beside me. I could see his pulse beating fast at the base of his neck. He studied the dense lines on the blueprint. His expression changed, from alarm to something harder, something like grim understanding. "This isn't a warehouse renovation," he said, his voice low. He pointed to a section labeled Armory, then to another, COMMS Hub. The plans didn't show a warehouse. They showed a fortress, a fortified compound. This was what I'd glimpsed before the door shut. This was Silas Crow's real design. But the rest of it made no sense at all. Why were my family's docs on a blueprint for a fortress? The chill from that trailer was still in my lungs. It felt like a chemical burn. I pushed open the door to the internet cafe, and the humid air from the machines hit my face. My brother Leo was huddled under a desk in the back corner. He was 22, all long limbs and messy brown hair. He flinched when he saw me. The decryption bar on his laptop screen was crawling. One painful pixel at a time, I heard it then. A heavy metal door slamming open next door, in the warehouse. Leo's fingers trembled over the keyboard. "It's almost done," he whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. The progress bar hit 100%. A list of names and official badge numbers flashed up. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway outside our room. They were methodical, checking each door. Leo jammed his thumb drive into the port. The files started copying. I could smell burnt coffee and the dust from the old computer towers. His hand was a blur on the touchpad. The footsteps stopped outside our door. The handle turned. The data burst hit my secure channel. A red transmission failed, warning blinked twice. Then it changed to a single, beautiful word. Sent. His signal died right after. A door kicked open with a crash next door. Leo slammed the laptop shut so hard, I thought the screen would crack. He scrambled back into the shadows under the desk, pulling his knees up to his chest. He was trapped. He could run, or he could hide the evidence. If they found that laptop, they found me too. His choice was simple. He shoved the laptop into a gap in the ceiling vent just as the door to our room splintered open. Everything else I could deal with. How my secure channel could receive a dead man's signal was different. I blinked, forcing the ghost of Leo's face from the back of my eyelids. I focused instead on a single line of rain tracing down Mateo's bulletproof window. I turned the tablet around and pushed it across the polished wood of his safe house desk. Mateo took it without a word. His dark eyes moved down the list of names Leo had sent. The only sound was the low hum of the computer server in the corner. I watched his face, not the screen. His expression tightened, then went flat. A muscle in his cheek twitched, a tiny movement he couldn't control. He ran a hand over his mouth. The gesture was slow, almost tired. My father trusted some of these men. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual command. He hadn't meant to say it. He leaned his shoulder against the bookcase behind him, and for a second he looked younger, like a man carrying a weight he never asked for. I felt a pull in my chest, a dangerous warmth. I stepped closer to the desk, my own reflection blurring in the dark window. I pointed to a map on the screen, tapping a warehouse district near our family docks. This is where they'll move him. It's the only Crow-controlled space left that's fortified. My arm brushed against his sleeve as I reached. Neither of us moved away. The air in the room felt heavy and still. He looked down at my hand on the tablet, then at me. His breath hitched, just a small catch I only heard because we were so close. He started to lift his right hand, his fingers curling slightly like he might touch my cheek. Then he stopped. He clenched that hand into a tight fist at his side. The moment snapped like a wire. I turned back to the tablet, my heart pounding against my ribs. I stayed because my brother's name was on that list. I stayed because the man who held all the power in this city had just shown me a crack in his walls, and I needed to see what was on the other side. I moved toward the door. What he had almost done with his raised hand moved with me. The chill from his study had settled deep into my bones. My boots hit the wet asphalt of the dockyard with a slick crunch. Rain hammered down on the steel shipping containers around us. We crouched behind one marked with fading blue paint. Silas's men moved in pairs 30 yards away, their flashlight beams cutting the misty rain. Mateo's voice crackled in my earpiece, confirming his Rossi soldiers were holding the perimeter. I pressed my back against the cold metal. A war was one wrong move away, and my brother was in the middle of it. We split up. "We can cover more ground," Mateo said beside me, his profile sharp against the gloom. It was the old rule. Rossis give orders. I shook my head, rain dripping from my hair. "No, we stay together. Leo trusts my signal, not yours." I met his eyes and refused to look away. He studied my face, and I saw the moment his plans changed. It was in the slight, tired droop of his eyelids. He gave a single, short nod. A shout echoed from the next row over. A flashlight beam swept across the puddles near our feet. Mateo grabbed my arm and pulled me deeper into the shadow between two massive containers. His hand stayed on my arm, a firm, warm pressure through my wet jacket. I didn't shrug him off. I needed the anchor. He had a gun on his hip and blood on his hands. I focused on the smell of wet rust and diesel fuel. Then I saw it. A flicker of light from a broken street lamp on a pole 50 yards ahead. It blinked once, went dark, then blinked again. Leo's old signal from when we played hide and seek. He was close, my breath caught. But from the other side, I saw 3 dark figures, Crow enforcers, moving toward the same row. I pointed silently. Mateo followed my line of sight, his face hardening. He drew his gun. We were in a race. Whatever came next, whether Leo had seen the enforcers closing in, was the part I hadn't figured out. The cold harbor rain still needled through my hair. I stood dripping on the worn hardwood floor of Mateo's living room, the sharp scent of lemon polish cutting through the damp wool of my coat. Mateo was across the room. He shrugged off his own soaked jacket with a stiff, tired motion. He didn't look at me as he walked toward the kitchen. I followed him. The kitchen was small and dim, lit by a single bulb over a stainless steel sink. I heard the low hum of the refrigerator. I cornered him there by the counter. I gripped the cold edge until my knuckles turned white. "Why is this so personal for you?" My voice shook. I took a step closer. I needed to see his face. He was looking down at the drain board. He didn't answer. I saw the faint line of an old scar across the back of his hand. "You knew they would be there. You knew Silas would send them. This is not just business for you." He looked away from me then. He rubbed his thumb over that pale scar on his palm. It was a slow, absent motion. His jaw tightened. He didn't move back. I could smell the rain on his skin. "Silas took something from me, too." The words were a whisper, low and rough. Our hands were almost touching on the counter. I saw his fingers curl. Then he pulled away and turned to the window. The rain streaked the dark glass. My brother, he said to his own reflection. He said it to the night. Marco was 17. He was smarter than me. He wanted out of all of this. Mateo's shoulders were rigid. He pressed his palms flat on the sink. Silas made an example of him. It was a message to my father. My breath stopped. All my frustration turned into something cold and heavy. I understood then. Leo wasn't the first brother used as a pawn. I was just a new weapon in a very old war. Mateo turned from the window. His eyes were dark and raw. For a second, I saw the boy who had lost everything. Then his face closed again. He reached out, his hand hovering near my arm. He didn't touch me. The gesture was pure possession and utter helplessness. That question, what I would have felt if his hand had touched my skin, sat there between us unfinished. The echo of his ragged breath was still in my chest when a soft knock came at my door later. I knew it was him. I opened it. Mateo stood there, hollowed out. He didn't speak. He just tilted his head for me to follow. He led me down the hall to a different door. His hands were unsteady with the key. He pushed it open without looking at me. The room was dark. It smelled of old wood and lemon polish. He turned on a single lamp. The light fell on a simple wooden dresser. On it was a framed photo of a young man with Mateo's smile, a worn baseball glove, a medal on a ribbon. Mateo's shoulders slumped as he stood before it. The strong leader was gone. "My brother Marco," he said. His voice was flat. Then he turned to me. His dark eyes held mine. Leo had seen them, the enforcers. He saw them and he ran. That's why he chose that container. The admission was quiet. It answered the question I'd been too afraid to ask. My brother had been scared and smart. A small relief, sharp as glass, cut through me. Mateo took a step closer. The space between us felt charged and still. He didn't touch me. His fingers went to the top button of his shirt. He undid it, then the next. He pulled the fabric aside just enough. There, over his heart, was a thick, jagged scar. The skin was pulled and shiny. It was old, but it looked angry. "This is from the same fight," he said. "The one that took him." "I got this." He got a bullet. I was scared. My hands stayed at my sides, cold and heavy. "I am so afraid your courage will get you killed like he was." His voice broke on the last word. He just stood there, the scar exposed, waiting, the way he looked at me then. It wasn't about the threat. I didn't know what to do with that. I wanted to reach out. I wanted to trace that terrible map on his skin. I did not move. We stood in the quiet, the unspoken thing so thick in the air I could taste it. I pushed it aside. The image of that scar was a weight lodged behind my ribs. Every breath felt shallow. Later, at the payphone, I pressed my forehead against the cold, grimy metal. The first gray light was seeping into the street. Back at the safe house window, I watched Mateo at his desk. He was making another list. Another plan to risk his men for Leo. His shoulders were rigid with a focus that would cost someone their life. I packed my small bag with quiet motions. I took only the hard drive and the beacon. I would not be another name on his list of losses. I remembered the photo of his sister on his desk. Her smile was safe because she was far away. I was just another person for him to lose, another weight on that rigid frame. I took a sheet of paper. I wrote, "I'm sorry." The words were stupid. They changed nothing. I crumpled the note and shoved it deep into my pocket. Goodbyes were for people who had a choice. I used the burner phone from the site trailer. My hand was perfectly steady as I dialed the number a Crow enforcer had once slipped me. The call connected after 2 rings. My breath fogged the payphone's cracked glass. "I have information on Matteo Rossi's next move," I said. My voice was cold and flat. "Trade me for my brother's location. Just me. No one else comes." The man on the other end was silent for a long moment. I could hear him breathing. Then he gave me a street corner 2 miles away. He said to come alone. He said they would have Leo's location with them. I ended the call. The empty safe house echoed with the distant sound of a single car passing. I left the keycard and the earpiece on the kitchen table. A clean break. Then I walked out into the pale morning, toward the corner where the black car would be waiting. But whether the man breathing on the line was really a Crow, I still had no answer for that. The vinyl seat was cold. It seeped right through my coat. I blinked against the sudden sting of salt and diesel as the warehouse door groaned shut behind me. Silas Crow stood across a vast office built inside the rusted shell. He watched me from behind a heavy oak desk. The space was warm. It smelled of new leather and coffee. It was nothing like the decay outside. I walked toward him. I ignored the expensive art on the walls. My boots sank into a thick rug. I planted my feet on it and faced him. "Why us?" I asked. My voice was flat in the big room. "Just tell me why." You have your empire, we were nobody. Silas picked up a glass paperweight from his desk. He turned it in his hand. Maybe I liked your brother's spirit, he said. He chuckled. No, that's not it. Leo was a loose end, a smart one, useful but messy. You were the perfect pressure point for him and for your medieval guardian. His words were smooth. I felt my hands start to shake at my sides. He was playing a game. I needed him to say it straight. I stepped forward. I gripped the cool, carved edge of his desk. Was it just business, or was it personal? Everything is personal, Silas said. He set the paperweight down with a soft click. His pale gray eyes went flat and cold. Your Mateo lives by an old code. It's a bottleneck. My projects need modern efficiency. The compound you found is one of several. A network. I don't just want his territory. I want the city's veins. Water power data. Leo's plans showed me how to build the locks. Your silence would have thrown the key into the sea. He hadn't chosen me. Something else had put us here. There was a difference. My fear hardened into something solid. Where is Leo? Silas smiled. He gestured to a reinforced door behind him. Alive, for now. He's in the next room. He's been listening, I expect. It's more motivating that way. He leaned back in his chair. He looked at me like I was already a tool on his shelf. I saw a faint line between his eyebrows. It only showed when his fake smile finally faded. The cold bite of the zip tie was still raw on my wrist. Mateo's armored car smelled of vetiver and gun oil. The city lights bled past the window. We sat in the back, separated by a handspan of leather. His driver and another man were up front. Mateo stared ahead. His profile was sharp against the glass. He didn't move or speak for a long time. Then he leaned toward me. He did it slowly, hidden by the dark. His voice was low, meant only for my ear. This was for you, he said. His breath was warm against my cheek. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the headrest in front of him. I felt the words more than I heard them. They were a secret past in the quiet. I didn't know what they meant. Not yet. I turned my head to look at him. The passing streetlights cut across his face. I saw the deep lines carved beside his mouth. They weren't from smiling. In that flash of light, he looked stripped bare. The dawn was just a tired man. I understood he had just told me something true. My chest felt tight. His shoulder brushed against mine. The contact was faint through our coats. It was an accident, or maybe it was. He didn't pull away for a full second. I could feel the solid weight of him. Then he straightened. He put careful distance back between us. He adjusted his cuff. The moment was gone. The space felt colder than before. I looked out my own window. I wondered what he was going to do with the truth he'd just given me. I wasn't going to like the answer. The heat of his confession was still a trapped fire behind my ribs. I stood frozen just inside Leo's cell. The damp chill went right through the soles of my boots. Leo sat against the concrete wall with his hands tied. His messy hair was flat with sweat. A single guard, a bulky man with a shaved head, leaned by the only door. The room smelled of mildew and old motor oil. I took a step toward Leo, but the guard shifted his weight. He blocked my path without a word. Leo's eyes met mine. They were wide and scared. I saw him shift his shoulders. His bound hands pressed against the front of his jacket. He always avoided the family war. Now he was tied up because of my choices. I felt a sick twist of guilt. He gave a tiny shake of his head, a warning for me to stay back. Then he took a deep, ragged breath. His whole body went tense with a decision. Suddenly, Leo started to cough. It was a harsh, barking sound that shook his frame. He curled forward, his face turning red. The guard pushed off the wall with a grunt. "Quiet down," he said. Leo gasped for air, his shoulders heaving. His tied hands twisted up under the hem of his jacket. I saw his fingers clawing at the lining. I wanted to move to help, but I was rooted. The guard took 2 steps closer, his hand going to the weapon at his hip. I said, "Cut it out." Leo's coughing stopped as suddenly as it started. He slumped against the wall, breathing hard, then he went completely still. His hands were hidden in his lap. A high-pitched whine cut through the silence for just a second. It came from Leo. The guard's head snapped toward the sound. His eyes narrowed. He saw it then, a faint green light glowing through the fabric of Leo's jacket. The guard's face changed. All the bored annoyance vanished, replaced by something cold and sure. He pulled his gun in one smooth motion. He pointed it right at Leo's head. "You little rat," he said. His voice was flat, dead. I didn't have time to process the green light or what it meant. I was already moving, pushing into the command center. The room was a tomb of humming servers. Blue lights blinked in the stale air. Silas Crow stood with his back to me, staring at a wall of monitors. His focus was locked on one screen, the one showing the guard, and the gun pointed at my brother's head. My throat closed up. I was desperate. "You lose either way now," I said. My voice sounded flat in the dead air. Silas finally turned. His suit was perfect, but a single lock of his dark hair had fallen out of place. It was a small flaw. It made him look more dangerous, not less. He looked at the screen, then back at me. His expression was mild, interested, like a man watching a bad play. "The beacon is live," I said. "Mateo knows exactly where we are." "I know," Silas said. His voice was calm. "But Mateo is a blunt instrument. He'll come through the front door. My men are ready for that." He walked to a control panel. His fingers moved over the keys, quiet and precise. On the main screen, a new window opened. It showed a live news broadcast feed. "Your brother's signal is clever," Silas said, "but I control the infrastructure. I decide what story the city sees." He was going to broadcast his own version, a lie that would make him the hero. My brother's truth would die in this room. I looked back at Leo's monitor. He was scrambling backward on the floor. The guard was stepping over a fallen crate. Leo's eyes were fixed on something under a metal desk, the hard drive. He had another one. He was going to try to plug it in. I had to keep Silas looking at me. "You want control of everything," I said, "but you never had it over me." Silas's head tilted a fraction. That was the only sign my words had hit. Then, on the screen, Leo kicked the leg of the metal desk. It screeched across the floor into the guard's shin. The man stumbled. Leo lunged for the computer terminal on the wall. His tied hands flew over the keyboard. Silas saw it too. His calm shattered. He slammed his hand down on a large red button on his console. I slipped into the grimy hallway, my knuckles throbbing. The air tasted of damp concrete and sweat. The firefight from the warehouse floor was a deafening storm. A man in a Crow security uniform was slumped against the wall ahead. A dark pool spread under his leg. His keycard was clipped to his belt. I moved fast, my breath short. I grabbed the plastic card. It was slick. The electronic lock on the holding cell door glowed red. I swiped the keycard. The lock buzzed and turned green. The door hissed open. Leo was inside, his hands bound with zip ties. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. He saw me, and a shaky relief washed over him. I ran to him, pulling my multi-tool out to cut the plastic bindings. On the monitor in the hallway, the screen flickered to life. It showed a live news broadcast. Silas Crow's face filled the frame, his voice crisp as he detailed the infrastructure bribes. Leo's signal had worked. For a second, I felt a wild, impossible hope. Then the broadcast cut to static. A shadow fell across the doorway. Silas Crow stood there, his expensive suit torn at the shoulder. He held a pistol loosely at his side. His eyes went from me to Leo, then to the dead monitor. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man who had lost one game but still held the only card that mattered. "Such a touching reunion," he said. His voice was calm, almost bored. He raised the gun, not at me, directly at Leo. Mateo's voice crackled in my earpiece, urgent, but the words were lost. All I saw was the barrel of the gun, and my brother's frozen face. Silas's finger rested on the trigger. A casual, final threat. The cold pressure of that gun barrel still felt like a dent between my ribs. An hour later, rain needled my face on the pier. The planks groaned under my weight. Behind us, the warehouse fire bled orange into the black water. The sirens were gone. My brother was safe in a car 2 blocks away. Mateo Rossi stood a few feet from me. He watched the embers die in the water, his suit jacket dark with rain. He turned toward me. The firelight caught the wet tracks on his cheeks. They weren't from the rain. I had never seen him cry. He didn't wipe the tears away. He just looked at me, and his whole face was open. It was a raw and broken thing. I didn't know what to do. My chest felt too tight to breathe. "I saw the guard raise his gun," he said. His voice was low and rough. "In the monitor, when I was clearing the hall, I saw the barrel pointing at your brother's face. I thought I was too late." He stopped. He looked down at his own empty hands. I have never been so afraid. The rain was just a fine mist between us now. I could see the quick rise and fall of his chest under his torn shirt. I could have reached out. He could have closed the gap. We did neither. That space was a silent agreement. It was a wall we were both building right then and there. His hand came up, but it didn't touch me. It just hovered near my arm, his fingers curled tight. This was a man who took what he wanted. Now he held himself completely, perfectly still. "You can't stay," he said. It wasn't a question. "My world would consume you. It would take that light and grind it into the dirt." I nodded because it was true. I thought of blood oaths and codes of silence. I thought of a life spent looking over my shoulder every single day. And I can't leave, I said. My voice was steady. It surprised even me. He finally moved. He let his hand fall, his control absolute and devastating, and took a full step back from me. But why his hand had hovered, why it had never touched me? I still had no answer. Real quick, if you were holding your breath for that moment, you're not alone. Hit subscribe. Because sometimes the most powerful stories are about the things that do happen. So I have to ask you, what would you have done? Would you have reached out knowing the cost? Or would you have let that wall stand? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories where the line between right and wrong gets blurry, make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next one.